VIP seat denied to Black woman on flight. Then she shows her ID. The protagonist, a successful Black woman who has risen through years of dedication and ambition, steps into the airport, exuding an air of quiet confidence. Her journey to this moment has been long, and flying first class today feels like a tangible reward, a recognition of all she has sacrificed and achieved along the way. This flight is not just about luxury or status. It's a reminder of her resilience, her hard work, and the countless nights she spent working long hours to carve out her path. For her, each milestone has been hard-earned, a testament to her unwavering resolve in the face of challenges. Before we can continue, if you love your family, subscribe to this channel to help up creating amazing stories. Now, let's continue. In her hand, she holds a boarding pass marked first class, along with a high-status identification card that attests to her connection with the airline. The ID symbolizes her position, her achievements, and the respect she's earned over the years. Dressed with elegance that reflects her professionalism, she moves with a steady grace. Each step feels almost ceremonial, marking her transition into a new level of success. This isn't just about a flight. It's a culmination of years of hard work finally acknowledged in a way that's visible and real. Her heart swells with a quiet pride that she doesn't often allow herself to feel. Today, she chooses to embrace it. As she approaches the priority boarding line, her anticipation grows. Glancing around, she notices a mix of reactions from the other passengers. Some look her way with admiration, perhaps acknowledging her sophistication and composure, while others cast glances tinged with curiosity or, she suspects, mild skepticism. She's accustomed to this kind of scrutiny, having often been questioned or doubted in professional settings, and while she tries not to let it affect her, it's hard not to notice. Yet today, she feels undeterred. The confidence she radiates is unshaken, a shield she has perfected over the years. She's done the work, earned her place, and isn't about to let glances from strangers cloud this moment. The boarding gate opens, and the familiar sound of names being called fills the area. She listens as the priority boarding group is invited forward, and with a quiet breath, she steps forward. She's waited for this privilege, worked tirelessly for it, and she allows herself to savor every second. Holding her head high, she takes her place in the line, her body language declaring, without words, that she belongs there. As she steps forward, she notices the luxurious details that await her. Her first-class seat will be spacious and comfortable, a sanctuary in the sky where she can finally relax after weeks of non-stop commitments and tight schedules. The idea of a quiet, peaceful space where she can sit back and breathe feels luxurious beyond words. Her mind wanders to her family, who supported her on this journey, and to her mentors, who believed in her even when she had doubts. She knows that in her culture, success like this is celebrated by everyone who helped her get there, as if her achievement belongs to the whole community. Her heart fills with gratitude. When she reaches the first-class line, she can't help but feel like she's in the right place. It's a rare feeling, a relief that her hard work has brought her to a moment of acceptance and belonging. She's allowed herself this moment to enjoy the fruits of her labor, and it feels deeply affirming. She lets out a soft sigh of relief, savoring her accomplishment. The priority line begins moving, and she watches as people filter in one by one. As she hands her ticket to the gate agent, she smiles. It's a simple act, but it holds a deeper meaning to her, symbolizing her journey and the battles she's fought to make it this far. When the agent scans her boarding pass, it's as though another barrier has been lifted. She walks down the jet bridge, and a sense of serenity washes over her as she nears the plane's entrance. As she steps onto the plane, she can almost feel the luxury and privilege in the air, an atmosphere she is now part of. But as she nears her seat, she notices the flight attendant standing nearby, her expression one of mild surprise. The woman's eyes scan her up and down, and then she does a quick double-take, her gaze narrowing slightly. The attendant hesitates, then steps forward, blocking her path. "Excuse me," the flight attendant says, her voice carrying a slight edge. "Are you sure this is your seat?" For a moment, The woman is taken aback, stunned by the implicit assumption in the attendant's tone. She remains calm, though her heart beats faster, a reminder of past moments when she had to prove herself in spaces that were quick to question her belonging. She raises her hand to show her boarding pass, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I am in first class," she responds calmly, though her mind is racing. The flight attendant's expression remains dubious, her brows furrowing as she inspects the boarding pass. Her body language betrays her skepticism, and she doesn't attempt to hide her doubt. "I'm sorry," the attendant says, her voice a bit louder now, "but this section is for first-class passengers only." The implication in her tone is unmistakable, and the woman feels a flash of anger, knowing that this judgment is based on her appearance, on assumptions that she doesn't belong here. Determined not to let this go unchallenged, she reaches into her bag and pulls out her high-status ID card, holding it out to the attendant. "Perhaps this will clear things up," she says, keeping her voice level. The ID serves as proof not only of her ticket, but of her connection to the airline itself. The attendant's eyes widen as she takes in the card, realizing her error. The shift in the flight attendant's demeanor is almost immediate. She stammers, her expression transforming from judgmental to apologetic. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean..." She fumbles for words, attempting to backtrack, but the woman's expression remains cool. Her silence says more than words could, conveying both the hurt and the quiet strength she has built up over the years of navigating similar encounters. The flight attendant continues to apologize, but the moment has already soured. The woman takes her seat, choosing to let her silence speak for itself. Other passengers, who witness the exchange, seem to react subtly. Some look uncomfortable, others avert their gaze. She ignores them, focusing on settling into her seat. Though the experience left a sour taste, she refuses to let it ruin her entire flight. She will not let someone else's prejudice taint her hard-earned right to be here. As the plane prepares for takeoff, she leans back, deciding to focus on the positives. She reflects on her journey, the people who have stood by her, and the triumphs that have brought her to this place. Her flight may have started with an unnecessary confrontation, but it also reaffirmed her resilience and the pride she feels in standing up for herself. Later, the incident reaches the airline's management, who take immediate action to address the situation. They acknowledge the woman's experience and issue a formal apology, promising to investigate further. The flight attendant, facing consequences for her actions, undergoes retraining on inclusivity and customer service, with additional sessions focused on diversity awareness. The airline follows up with a statement, emphasizing its commitment to treating all passengers with respect, regardless of appearance or background. The woman receives a personal message from a senior executive who thanks her for her patience and assures her that steps will be taken to ensure no other passenger experiences a similar incident. The sincerity of the message brings a sense of closure, though she knows it doesn't erase what happened. Instead, it serves as a reminder that change is necessary and that her actions have prompted a ripple effect within the airline. Over time, she learns that the airline has implemented additional training programs and policies to prevent similar instances in the future. Her story becomes a turning point, a catalyst for change that benefits everyone, especially those who have felt unseen or underestimated in their journey to success. As she approached her assigned seat in the first-class section, the anticipation and pride she felt just moments ago began to shift into an unfamiliar tension. She'd flown countless times before, but this time was special. It wasn't just about travel, it was a reward she had earned after years of hard work. Flying first class was more than just a seat on the plane. It was a validation of the sacrifices she'd made, the long hours, and the relentless pursuit of her goals. And now, as she approached, she allowed herself to feel a sense of satisfaction and joy. Yet, that sense of joy started to dim as she caught sight of the flight attendant. The woman was watching her closely, her expression a mix of skepticism and something else, a guarded wariness, as if bracing for something amiss. The passenger could feel her gaze linger, not just a glance, but an assessment and inspection. It was a look she had seen before, one that seemed to measure her presence, questioning her right to occupy that space. The flight attendant moved toward her, her posture rigid and her lips set in a line that communicated doubt. "Excuse me," the attendant said in a tone that managed to be both polite and dismissive, her voice low but pointed. "Are you sure you're in the right section?" The question was a simple one in form, yet the tone made it anything but. It cut through the warm anticipation she had carried with her, sending a chill down her spine. She had been excited, looking forward to finally experiencing the perks she had heard of, the comfort, the attentive service, the sheer novelty of it all. Now, she felt something different, a pang of indignation and hurt, cloaked in a familiar frustration. For years, she'd learned to recognize this feeling, a quiet indignity that came with being subtly and indirectly reminded of the world's expectations and assumptions about who she was and where she belonged. For a moment, she wondered if she should let it slide, but she quickly dismissed the thought. No, this wasn't something to overlook or brush aside. She had earned this seat, just as she had earned every other achievement in her life, and no amount of scrutiny or judgment would make her feel otherwise. Her voice, calm and even, held none of the emotions swirling within her as she held out her ticket, showing it to the flight attendant with a steady hand. "Yes, this is my seat," she said, her tone firm yet composed, matching the strength of her gaze as she met the attendant's eyes directly. The flight attendant took a cursory glance at the ticket, but her demeanor didn't soften. She gave a slight shake of her head, more an instinctive reflex than a conscious decision, as if the sight of this woman with a first-class ticket was incompatible with her expectations. There was a pause, a hesitation, that hung in the air, thick with tension and disbelief. The attendant's eyes flicked back and forth between the ticket and the woman standing before her, as though searching for some hidden error, a reason to question what seemed plainly apparent. Behind her, a few passengers seated comfortably in first class had taken notice. Heads turned, brows furrowed in curiosity, and whispers passed from one seat to another. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the quiet murmurs building like a rising tide, a background noise that amplified her sense of exposure and discomfort. What should have been a celebratory moment, a simple act of boarding her flight, was now an unwanted spectacle, a public interrogation that transformed her rightful place into a question mark. A swell of frustration and anger simmered beneath her calm exterior, emotions tempered by years of similar experiences. This wasn't the first time she had been made to feel like she was in the wrong place simply by existing in spaces that others deemed exclusive or inaccessible. She thought of the late nights and early mornings that had paved her path here, the times she had worked harder than anyone else, determined to reach her goals despite the obstacles in her way. This seat wasn't a favor, it was hers, purchased with her hard-earned money and rightfully hers to enjoy. Her calm, though, was unbreakable. She knew that losing her composure would do little more than feed the stereotypes that had led her here in the first place. She remained composed, standing tall, every inch of her presence an assertion of her right to be here. A look of quiet strength passed across her face as she held the flight attendant's gaze, waiting for her to step aside. She was determined not to let this moment strip away her pride or undermine her accomplishment. Still, the attendant hesitated, glancing at the other passengers for some unspoken confirmation, as though expecting someone to intervene. But no one spoke. Instead, the whispers grew softer, and the passengers seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Finally, perhaps sensing the futility of her silent opposition, the attendant stepped aside, albeit with a lingering stiffness that belied her reluctance. She gave the woman a thin-lipped nod, gesturing for her to continue. The woman took her seat, sinking into the plush comfort of first class, the sensation a stark contrast to the tension that still clung to her like a shadow. She placed her bag beneath her seat, a slight tremor in her hand the only visible sign of the emotions she kept contained. Her heart still beat faster than she liked, a mix of adrenaline and residual frustration simmering within her. She took a steadying breath, straightening her posture and reminding herself that she belonged here, no matter what anyone else thought. As she adjusted in her seat, she allowed herself a moment to survey the cabin. A few of the other passengers had returned to their routines, leafing through magazines or watching movies on the screens embedded in the seatbacks. Yet she could still feel a few lingering glances, furtive yet unmistakable, from those who hadn't yet moved past the scene that had just unfolded. But she met each look with a steady gaze, unflinching, refusing to let herself feel diminished by their curiosity or judgment. Minutes later, the attendant reappeared, her demeanor softened but still tinged with an awkward reluctance. She offered the woman a drink, a gesture that seemed more perfunctory than genuine, as though fulfilling an obligation rather than offering a service. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, her tone lacking the warmth she afforded to the other first-class passengers. The woman responded with a polite nod, accepting the drink with a calm that belied the turmoil she still felt. The drink felt almost symbolic, a small acknowledgement of her presence, a gesture that barely scratched the surface of the experience she'd just endured. She sipped it slowly, the cool liquid soothing but unable to wash away the bitterness that lingered from the encounter. The flight continued without incident, yet the impact of those initial moments stayed with her, a reminder of the barriers she continued to face even in spaces she had rightfully earned her way into. She felt a quiet, simmering determination to change these spaces, to pave the way so that others who came after her wouldn't have to endure the same quiet indignities, the same unspoken questions about their right to be there. As the plane touched down at her destination, she gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark. Her gaze swept over the cabin one last time, the faces of the passengers who had watched her blending into the faceless crowd. She made her way toward the exit, her steps measured, her chin held high. The flight attendant was there, standing by the door, her expression unreadable as she offered a brisk, "Thank you for flying with us." The woman nodded, her expression polite but distant, a silent acknowledgement of the experience that had marked this journey. As she stepped off the plane, she felt a familiar resolve, a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own accomplishments. She had come this far, overcoming countless obstacles, and she knew she would continue to push forward, not only for herself, but for everyone who deserved to stand in spaces that had once seemed off-limits. The incident became a story she shared sparingly, not because it defined her, but because it highlighted the resilience she carried within her, a resilience forged by a lifetime of breaking through barriers and proving herself in spaces that questioned her right to exist. And each time she recounted it, the story served as a reminder to others and to herself that she was, indeed, unbreakable. This experience would not deter her. Instead, it would strengthen her resolve to stand tall in every room, in every seat, in every place she had worked so hard to reach. She had earned it all, and no one, not a flight attendant, not a roomful of strangers, could ever take that away from her. As the interaction between the protagonist and the flight attendant escalated, the tension in the air grew thick, palpable to everyone around them. The flight attendant's expression shifted from skepticism to outright disbelief, and her voice rose, cutting through the ambient noise of the cabin. "You must have made a mistake," she insisted, her words dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you inadvertently received the wrong boarding pass." The implication hung in the air like a weight, a suggestion that somehow, this well-dressed, confident woman couldn't possibly belong in first class. At that moment, the woman felt a surge of heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment alone, but from a quiet, simmering anger that had begun to take root within her. How could this flight attendant, someone tasked with ensuring passenger comfort and safety, choose to publicly question her legitimacy instead of treating her with the respect she deserved? The surrounding passengers began to shift in their seats, the sound of whispered conversations mingling with the hum of the airplane. She could feel their eyes on her, some wide with curiosity, others narrowed in judgment, a collective audience witnessing her humiliation. She glanced at a few faces, and her stomach twisted at the sight of their intrigue. How could she be reduced to a spectacle, a point of gossip among strangers? The realization that, despite having paid for her seat and adhered to all the rules, she was now being publicly questioned felt like a betrayal. The exhaustion from having to constantly defend her right to occupy spaces meant for her seemed insurmountable in this moment. Drawing a deep breath, she steadied herself, determined not to let this situation spiral out of control. She had come so far, worked so hard to reach this point, and she refused to be cowed by the unfounded assumptions of someone who didn't know her story. Choosing her words with precision, she looked the flight attendant directly in the eye and said, "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." Her voice was calm but firm, each syllable laced with the strength of her convictions. Yet even as she spoke, the sting of humiliation washed over her. The tension had drawn the attention of other passengers who were now invested in the unfolding drama. She could see a few eyebrows raised, lips pressed into thin lines, all bearing witness to what felt like an indignity, an affront to her character. The attendant's actions were steeped in bias, a presumptive judgment about her worthiness based solely on her appearance. Holding her head high, she refused to back down, prepared to show her credentials if necessary, determined to assert her right to be there, to occupy that space, to exist without question. The flight attendant, taken aback for a moment, hesitated. The firm resolve in the woman's voice seemed to penetrate her defensive armor, even if only slightly. But the attendant quickly regained her composure, her expression shifting back to one of skepticism. "I'll need to see your identification," she insisted, her tone colder now, as if this were merely a standard procedure rather than a personal affront. The woman felt a flash of indignation surge through her, and her heart raced. The request felt like a further affront, an implication that she needed to prove her worthiness in a way that others would not. She had anticipated a smooth boarding process, a transition from the bustling terminal to the tranquil cocoon of first class, where the world melted away and comfort reigned. Instead, she found herself embroiled in a confrontation, fighting against an unspoken but palpable bias that painted her as an outsider. Without breaking eye contact, she reached into her purse, retrieving her high-status identification card that confirmed her connection to the airline. As she handed it over, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Would this be enough to silence the doubts? Would it change the narrative that had unfolded so publicly? The attendant took the card, her gaze flitting between the identification and the woman's face. There was a flicker of recognition as she studied the card, a glimmer of understanding that perhaps, just perhaps, the woman in front of her wasn't just an anomaly but a person of substance, a professional who had earned her place in first class. But the attendant's skepticism didn't fade completely. It lingered like a shadow. "Thank you," the attendant said, her voice softer but still carrying an undertone of reluctance. "I'll just need to confirm this." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the woman in a state of suspended disbelief. As the attendant moved toward the cockpit, the protagonist felt the eyes of her fellow passengers on her once more. They watched in rapt attention, some leaning forward slightly in their seats, their expressions a mix of intrigue and sympathy. The moments felt like an eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying the discomfort and tension of the situation. She glanced at the faces around her, searching for support, a nod of understanding, but she found only curiosity. A silent wave of solidarity washed over her, but it did little to soothe the sting of humiliation that had settled in her chest. Would anyone stand up for her? Would anyone speak out against this blatant display of bias? She realized that she was alone in this fight, yet she drew strength from the knowledge that she had fought for her place in every arena she had entered throughout her life. When the attendant finally returned, she wore a tight-lipped smile that did little to mask her discomfort. "Everything checks out," she said, though her tone remained stiff. "You're all set." But the warmth was absent from her words, the acknowledgement of the woman's right to be there still unspoken. "Thank you," the woman replied, her voice even. "I appreciate it." The words felt hollow. They were a formality in a situation that had revealed deep-seated biases. As the flight attendant turned away, she sensed a mixture of relief and frustration welling up inside her. This was not just a minor inconvenience. It was a clear reflection of the systemic issues that persisted, issues that she had fought against her entire life. Settling into her seat, The woman let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She wanted to enjoy the comfort of first class, the spacious seating, the attentive service, the luxurious amenities, but the sting of that encounter hung over her like a cloud. She could feel the exhaustion creeping in, a tiredness that went beyond the physical. It seeped into her very bones, a weariness born from battling the world's misconceptions and biases day after day. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, the sound of the engines roaring to life filled her ears. It was a reminder that she was embarking on a journey, both literal and metaphorical. But this journey felt different. It was shadowed by the earlier confrontation, a reminder of the hurdles she continued to face. The flight attendant passed by again, this time with a drink cart, offering refreshments to the first-class passengers. She moved with a practiced ease, a stark contrast to the tension that had existed moments before. The woman's gaze locked onto the attendant as she approached, curious if there would be any hint of acknowledgement, any shift in the attendant's demeanor. "Would you like something to drink?" the attendant asked, her tone neutral. "Yes, please," the woman replied, forcing a smile despite the unease still lingering in her chest. The attendant poured a glass of champagne, handing it over without meeting her eyes. The woman accepted it graciously, offering a nod in return, though the interaction felt strained. As the flight took off, she allowed herself a moment of reprieve, taking a sip of the champagne and savoring the bubbly effervescence as it danced on her tongue. She reflected on how far she had come, how many challenges she had faced to reach this point. The road had been long and winding, filled with obstacles that often felt insurmountable. Each step had required resilience and determination, qualities she had honed over the years. Yet, despite her successes, moments like these served as reminders that the journey was ongoing, that biases and judgments still lingered, waiting to rear their heads in the most unexpected situations. The flight continued, and as she settled into the comfort of her surroundings, she tried to shake off the earlier encounter. She focused on the amenities around her, the plush seat, the warm towel offered by another flight attendant, the selection of entertainment options waiting for her on the screen. Each little detail was designed to make her feel pampered, and she wanted to embrace that feeling fully. As the clouds billowed outside the window, she gazed out, letting her mind wander. She thought of the stories that needed to be told, the conversations that needed to happen, the bridges that needed to be built. This was just one instance in a long line of experiences that highlighted the disparities faced by people of color in spaces, often considered exclusive. The flight attendant's actions weren't an isolated incident. They were part of a larger narrative that needed addressing. And so, she vowed that she wouldn't let this moment define her. Instead, it would become a part of her story, a testament to her resilience, a reminder of the biases she was determined to combat. She would use her voice, her platform, to advocate for change, to challenge the status quo. She knew that if she wanted to see the world become a more equitable place, she needed to be part of that change. By the time the plane began its descent, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. She had faced adversity, but she wouldn't allow it to extinguish her fire. Instead, she would rise, stronger and more determined than ever, ready to forge ahead into the unknown, armed with the knowledge that her presence mattered, that her voice deserved to be heard. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac, she felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. This was just the beginning of her journey, and she was prepared to embrace whatever lay ahead. The challenges might be daunting, but she was ready to confront them head-on, knowing that her worth was not defined by the judgments of others, but by the strength of her spirit and the depth of her resolve. In response to the attendant's continued insistence, the woman felt a surge of determination and confidence. She reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against the fabric of the high-status ID card that had become a symbol of her hard work and dedication. This card was not merely a piece of plastic. It represented her connection to the airline, the countless hours she had put into her career, and the countless sacrifices she had made to reach this point. It was a badge of honor that reaffirmed her place in first class. With a steady hand, she pulled out the ID card, her heart racing not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline that accompanied the knowledge that she was about to reclaim her dignity. Alongside the ID, she also held her boarding pass, the ticket that had been purchased with her hard-earned money. As she presented both documents to the attendant, she felt a wave of empowerment wash over her. This was her moment to assert her rightful place in the cabin, to stand firm against the unjust scrutiny she had endured. The attendant's eyes widened as she examined the ID, a flicker of recognition passing across her face. The weight of the woman's status began to settle into the attendant's consciousness, the realization hitting her like a cold splash of water. This was not just any passenger. This was someone with authority, someone who had earned her place in the exclusive realm of first class. The attendant's previous confidence wavered, her posture shifting as she began to comprehend the magnitude of her misjudgment. An abrupt shift occurred in the attendant's demeanor. Her expression morphed from one of skepticism to one of embarrassment and regret. "I am sorry," she stammered, her voice faltering as she grappled with the weight of her assumptions. "I didn't realize," but her words trailed off, leaving an awkward silence hanging between them. The woman could see the attendant's face flushing with the heat of realization, the color draining as the attendant recognized the gravity of her actions. As the attendant attempted to justify her behavior, her words became a jumble of half-hearted excuses. "I thought there must have been a mistake. You know, sometimes we get passengers who don't have the correct boarding pass, and it's my job to." Her voice trailed off again, and the woman could sense the attendant's discomfort, a palpable embarrassment that suffused the air around them. The woman stood there, unflinching, watching the attendant struggle to regain her composure. She felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and lingering frustration at the situation. The power dynamic had shifted. She now held the authority in this exchange, a role she had never wanted but had been thrust into by circumstances beyond her control. It was a bittersweet victory. She had proven her worth, yet the path to this moment had been littered with assumptions that should never have existed in the first place. Despite the attendant's awkward attempts to apologize, the woman knew that an apology alone could not erase the impact of the assumptions made about her. The sting of the initial confrontation lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the biases that had colored the attendant's perception of her from the very beginning. The injustice she had faced was not merely personal, it was a reflection of a larger societal issue, one that she had encountered time and time again throughout her life. As the attendant fumbled for words, the woman remained calm, her silence conveying a quiet strength and resilience. She understood that this was a pivotal moment, one that transcended the immediate circumstances of their exchange. It was a chance to reclaim her narrative, to remind the world that she belonged in every space she occupied, including this one. The flight attendant's earlier skepticism had revealed a painful truth about the biases that persisted in society, and she was determined to stand tall in the face of that truth. "Look," the woman said finally, her voice steady and firm. "I appreciate your apology, but it's important to recognize that assumptions can have a profound impact on people's lives. I worked hard to be here, and moments like this can feel like a denial of my accomplishments." Her words hung in the air, a challenge to the attendant to reflect on her actions and the biases that had led to this confrontation. The attendant nodded, her expression softening as she absorbed the woman's words. "I understand," she replied, her voice now tinged with sincerity. "I truly didn't mean to make you feel this way. It was a misunderstanding on my part, and I'm really sorry." The remorse in her voice was genuine, but the woman knew that sincerity wasn't always enough. Trust, once broken, would take time to rebuild. "I appreciate your acknowledgement," the woman replied, her tone neutral. "But please understand that this isn't just about us right now. It's about the larger issue of how people perceive others based on their appearance. It's about the assumptions made in the blink of an eye, without any regard for the individual's story." She felt a surge of purpose, a desire to use this moment as an opportunity for change. As the attendant listened, the woman's voice took on a tone of urgency. "This is about more than just this flight. It's about the countless individuals who face similar situations daily. The next time you question someone's right to be in a particular space, I hope you remember this moment and the impact it can have." She spoke with conviction, her words flowing from a place of lived experience and resilience. The attendant's expression shifted from embarrassment to understanding, her eyes reflecting the weight of the conversation. "You're right," she said quietly, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment as she processed the significance of the woman's words. "I'll do better. I promise." As they stood there, a newfound respect began to emerge from the remnants of their earlier confrontation. The woman realized that, while the encounter had started from a place of bias, it had the potential to spark a change in the attendant's perspective. Perhaps this moment could serve as a catalyst for growth, not only for the attendant but for the airline and the broader society. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and the woman took a moment to collect her thoughts. She felt a mix of hope and determination. This was not just about her personal experience. It was a reminder of the ongoing battle against systemic biases that so many face daily. The journey to dismantle those biases would be long and arduous, but every conversation, every moment of vulnerability, brought her one step closer to creating a more equitable world. As the aircraft lifted off the ground, she gazed out the window, watching the earth recede beneath them. The feeling of elevation was not just physical, it mirrored her own ascent, a journey marked by perseverance and strength. She had faced adversity head-on, and although the experience had been painful, it had also reaffirmed her commitment to advocating for herself and others. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, the flight attendants resumed their duties, offering refreshments to passengers. The woman was pleasantly surprised when the same attendant approached her again, a small smile replacing the earlier tension. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her tone more warm and inviting now. "Yes, please," the woman replied, her demeanor softening as well. "I'd love a glass of water, thank you." As the attendant poured the water, the woman took a moment to observe the passengers around her, the sense of camaraderie in the first-class cabin slowly returning. The awkwardness of the earlier encounter seemed to dissipate, replaced by a shared experience of travel. Perhaps, in time, this flight would become just another journey, one filled with laughter, stories, and connections. As the attendant handed her the glass, the woman offered a genuine smile. "Thank you for your service," she said, feeling the warmth of connection return. "I appreciate it." The attendant's smile widened, and the warmth in her eyes suggested that perhaps the earlier encounter had not only impacted the woman but also the attendant's own understanding of her role. In that moment, a bridge had been built, connecting them through shared humanity. The remainder of the flight passed with relative ease, the woman sinking into her plush seat and indulging in the entertainment options available. She watched a film, allowing the light-hearted story to distract her from the earlier tensions. But even as she laughed at the comedic moments, her mind occasionally drifted back to the encounter with the attendant. As the plane cruised through the clouds, she reflected on the importance of advocacy, of standing up for oneself and others. It was a reminder that the fight for equality and respect was ongoing, and while it could be exhausting, it was also essential. Each moment of confrontation held the potential for growth, for change, and she was determined to be a part of that movement. When the flight began its descent, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges she had faced, both on this flight and in her life, had only fueled her desire to create a world where everyone felt seen and valued. As the aircraft touched down, she knew that this moment would stay with her long after the flight was over. With a deep breath, she prepared to disembark, feeling a mixture of anticipation and resolve. She would carry the lessons of this flight with her, using them to fuel her advocacy and inspire others to speak out against bias. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, she felt the weight of her journey and the power of her voice. This experience had reminded her that she belonged in every space she occupied, and she was ready to continue forging a path toward equality and respect for all. Word of the incident quickly reached the airline's management team, their response immediate and unwavering. In the world of aviation, where customer experience is paramount, any instance of discrimination could lead to reputational damage that would take years to repair. They understood that such behavior reflected poorly not only on the flight attendant involved but on the entire airline. As the plane prepared for takeoff, The cabin buzzed with a mix of anticipation and tension, the atmosphere charged with an undercurrent of the recent events. Within moments, a manager, distinguished by their crisp suit and the insignia of authority, entered the cabin. The woman felt a flicker of hope mixed with skepticism. Would this encounter lead to meaningful change, or would it merely be a formality? The manager approached her, their expression earnest and deeply concerned. "I'm truly sorry for the treatment you received," the manager said, their voice steady yet empathetic. "We take matters like this very seriously. I want to assure you that our airline does not condone discrimination in any form." The woman listened attentively as the manager continued, detailing the protocols the airline had in place to prevent such incidents. The words flowed smoothly, a rehearsed response aimed at alleviating her concerns. The manager spoke of training programs, emphasizing the airline's commitment to diversity and inclusion. As they spoke, she maintained an impassive expression, her gaze steady, taking in every detail of the manager's demeanor. While the manager's apology felt sincere, she couldn't shake the feeling that words alone would not resolve the underlying issue. Her life had been shaped by experiences that highlighted the persistent biases that existed in society, and she understood all too well that acknowledging a problem was merely the first step. She sensed that the manager's assurances, while necessary, only scratched the surface of a deeper, systemic issue. "I appreciate your concern and the apology," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I hope this leads to real action, not just a conversation." Her DS hung in the air, charged with the weight of her experience. She wanted to ensure that this moment would not be forgotten, that it would serve as a catalyst for change within the airline and beyond. The manager nodded, their expression shifting to one of understanding. "I completely agree. Our team will conduct a thorough investigation, and I will personally ensure that this is addressed. We are committed to treating all passengers with respect and dignity." The promise lingered between them, a delicate thread connecting their shared responsibility in ensuring that such incidents would not happen again. Meanwhile, the other passengers observed this interaction in respectful silence. A palpable tension hung in the air, and many had witnessed the earlier exchange between the woman and the flight attendant. Some nodded in acknowledgement of the injustice she faced, their expressions reflecting a shared discomfort with the situation. It was a silent demonstration of solidarity, a recognition that the fight against discrimination extended beyond any single individual. As the plane began its ascent into the sky, the woman took a deep breath, the initial adrenaline of the confrontation slowly subsiding. She gazed out the window, watching the landscape fade beneath them. Despite the turbulent start, she felt a renewed sense of determination. This incident had not only highlighted her struggle but had also illuminated a larger societal issue, one that demanded attention and action. The flight continued, and the woman tried to focus on the journey ahead. The initial tension gradually dissipated, replaced by the soothing hum of the aircraft. She leaned back in her seat, allowing herself to relax, yet her mind remained engaged, contemplating the implications of the encounter. The flight attendants resumed their duties, moving gracefully through the aisle, offering refreshments and comfort to the passengers. As they served drinks, the same attendant who had initially questioned her approached again, this time with a tentative smile. "Can I get you anything else?" the attendant asked, her tone markedly softer than before. The woman looked up, meeting the attendant's gaze with a mixture of empathy and resolve. "Yes, please, I'd like a glass of water." "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. As the attendant poured the water, she noticed the subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere. The initial awkwardness had given way to a shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of the need for change. "Thank you for your service," the woman said, her tone genuine. "I appreciate it." The attendant's smile widened, and there was a sense of relief in her expression. In that moment, a bridge had begun to form between them, connecting their shared humanity despite the earlier conflict. It was a small but significant step towards healing the rift that had momentarily divided them. As the flight progressed, the woman engaged in casual conversations with the passengers around her, sharing stories and laughter. The camaraderie that began to blossom in the cabin felt uplifting. It was a reminder that despite the challenges they faced individually, they were all part of a larger community, united by their shared experience of travel. Yet, in the back of her mind, the woman couldn't shake the weight of the earlier incident. She remained acutely aware that her experience was not an isolated one. It was part of a broader narrative about race, privilege, and systemic bias. The conversation she had with the manager earlier lingered in her thoughts, a potent reminder of the ongoing need for advocacy and change. As the plane soared above the clouds, she thought about the conversations that needed to happen, not just within the airline but across society as a whole. There were so many untold stories, voices that had been silenced by prejudice, and she felt a responsibility to amplify those voices. The flight had become more than just a journey. It was an opportunity to advocate for herself and others who had faced similar challenges. When the plane reached its cruising altitude, the captain made an announcement, providing updates on their flight path and expected arrival time. The woman smiled at the friendly tone, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She glanced around the cabin, taking in the diverse faces surrounding her. Each person had their own story, their own journey, and she felt a deep appreciation for the shared experience of travel. As the flight attendants continued their rounds, the woman reflected on the progress she had made in her own life. She had encountered numerous obstacles, but each challenge had only fueled her determination to succeed. She thought about the sacrifices her family had made, the barriers they had overcome, and the pride they would feel in her achievements. This flight, with all its complications, was a testament to that journey. As the aircraft continued to cruise, she allowed herself to indulge in some light entertainment, watching a film that resonated with her. The story, filled with themes of resilience and hope, struck a chord deep within her. It reminded her of the importance of perseverance, of pushing through adversity, and of standing up for what was right. As the credits rolled, she felt a renewed sense of purpose ignited within her. When the flight attendants began serving lunch, the atmosphere in the cabin was noticeably lighter. Conversations flowed more freely, laughter mingling with the clinking of silverware. The woman engaged in discussions with her fellow passengers, sharing anecdotes and learning about their backgrounds. It was a beautiful reminder that connection could flourish even in the most unexpected of circumstances. However, the earlier confrontation lingered in her mind, not as a source of anger, but as a motivator. She was determined to advocate for change, to use her voice and experiences to make a difference. She began to think about how she could channel her energy into creating a platform for those who felt unheard. Whether through speaking engagements, writing, or community activism, she knew she had the power to inspire others to stand up against discrimination. As the plane began its descent, the woman felt a mix of excitement and resolve. The journey she had taken on this flight would extend beyond the physical distance traveled. It would continue in her efforts to advocate for equality and justice. She knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger mission, one that would require persistence, courage, and a commitment to fostering understanding among diverse communities. When the aircraft touched down smoothly, the cabin erupted in applause, a collective celebration of their safe arrival. The woman joined in, feeling a rush of gratitude for the journey they had shared. As the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began gathering their belongings, preparing to disembark. With each step toward the exit, she felt a sense of empowerment. This experience had reaffirmed her belief in the importance of standing up for herself and others. She would carry the lessons learned from this flight into her daily life, using her voice to advocate for change wherever she could. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, she felt the weight of her journey and the power of her voice. This experience had reminded her that she belonged in every space she occupied, and she was ready to continue forging a path toward equality and respect for all. The challenges she faced were not just her own. They were part of a collective struggle, and she was committed to being an agent of change. In that moment, she felt a surge of hope for the future. The world could be a better place, one where everyone felt valued and respected. And she would be a part of that change, determined to inspire others to join her in the fight for justice and equality. Following an investigation that unfolded over the subsequent days, the airline's management team faced a critical decision regarding the flight attendants' conduct. They recognized the gravity of the situation and understood that their response would not only impact the attendant, but also reflect their commitment to maintaining a culture of respect and inclusivity within the organization. As they deliberated, they acknowledged that the incident had exposed a significant gap in their training and operational protocols. Ultimately, the airline decided on serious consequences for the flight attendant's behavior. She would be required to undergo extensive retraining focused on diversity, inclusion, and customer service. This retraining was not merely a formality. It was designed to instill a deeper understanding of the importance of treating all passengers with dignity, regardless of their background or appearance. The airline engaged external consultants who specialized in diversity training, ensuring that the curriculum was comprehensive and impactful. In addition to the retraining, the airline also assigned the flight attendant community service as a means of fostering empathy and understanding. She was required to volunteer with organizations that supported underrepresented communities, allowing her to engage directly with individuals whose experiences differed significantly from her own. This aspect of her consequence was particularly poignant. It was meant to bridge the gap between her previous assumptions and the realities faced by those who often found themselves in positions similar to the protagonists. The airline believed that this first-hand experience would be instrumental in reshaping her perspective. As news of the airline's actions became public, the company released a statement addressing the incident. The statement reaffirmed their commitment to inclusivity and respect for all passengers, emphasizing that discrimination, whether subtle or overt, was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. The airline's leadership acknowledged the incident as a learning opportunity, not just for the flight attendant, but for the entire organization. They pledged to review and enhance their training protocols, ensuring that all employees were equipped to handle situations with sensitivity and respect. For the woman who had endured the confrontation, there was a profound sense of justice in knowing that her experience had led to real consequences and efforts to change. She felt a mixture of relief and empowerment, recognizing that her stance during the incident had not only advocated for her rights but also for all individuals who might face similar treatment. It was a powerful realization that standing her ground had catalyzed a change within the company's policies and practices. The fact that the airline took swift action to address the issue served as validation for her experience. It reinforced her belief that her voice mattered, and it underscored the importance of speaking out against injustice. She felt proud to be part of a larger movement toward accountability, a movement that challenged the status quo and demanded respect for all individuals, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic status. Moreover, the flight attendants' mandatory training was a poignant reminder that discrimination must be actively addressed and dismantled. It highlighted the necessity of ongoing education and awareness within the airline industry and beyond. The woman understood that the path to real change was often slow and fraught with challenges, but she was encouraged by the actions taken by the airline. It demonstrated that organizations could learn from their mistakes and take meaningful steps toward fostering an inclusive environment. As the weeks passed, the woman reflected on the incident and its aftermath. She received messages of support from fellow passengers who had witnessed the confrontation and stood in solidarity with her during the flight. Their words reminded her that her experience had resonated beyond the confines of the aircraft. It had sparked conversations about race, privilege, and the responsibility each individual held in creating a more inclusive society. Feeling emboldened, she began to explore ways to channel her experience into advocacy. She reached out to organizations focused on promoting diversity and inclusion, offering her voice and perspective as a way to contribute to the dialogue. She realized that while her individual experience was significant, it was part of a larger narrative that demanded attention. By sharing her story, she hoped to inspire others to stand up against discrimination and foster understanding among diverse communities. The airline's commitment to improvement and its response to the incident became a case study in corporate responsibility. Other companies began to take notice, recognizing the need for proactive measures to address discrimination within their own organizations. The woman's experience served as a catalyst for broader discussions about the importance of diversity training and the role it plays in shaping workplace culture. In this environment of heightened awareness, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that advocacy was not just about addressing individual incidents, but about challenging systemic issues that perpetuated discrimination. She was determined to be a part of that change, using her voice and experiences to uplift others who faced similar struggles. As the flight attendant completed her training and community service, she underwent a transformation. She began to reflect on her assumptions and biases, gaining a deeper understanding of the impact of her actions. The community service experiences opened her eyes to the challenges faced by marginalized individuals, fostering a sense of empathy she had not fully grasped before. Through her journey, the woman recognized that change often starts with uncomfortable conversations and self-reflection. The flight attendant's path to understanding mirrored her own experiences of growth and empowerment. It became clear to her that education and awareness were vital in combating discrimination, and she was committed to supporting initiatives that promoted these values. In the end, the incident had profound implications that extended far beyond the flight. It sparked a dialogue about accountability, respect, and the collective responsibility to challenge biases that exist in society. The woman emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to advocate for change and inspire others to join her in the fight against discrimination. As she continued her journey, she remained hopeful that the airline industry and society as a whole would embrace the lessons learned from this incident. Her experience had become a testament to the power of resilience and the impact of standing up for what is right. Together, individuals could foster a culture of inclusivity and respect, ensuring that everyone felt valued and acknowledged in every space they occupied. Through her advocacy, she aimed to create a world where the color of one's skin or the assumptions based on appearance would never determine one's worth or place in society. The journey was ongoing, but she was ready to face the challenges ahead with unwavering determination, knowing that her voice, and the voices of many others, would continue to resonate in the pursuit of justice and equality. In the weeks that follow, the airline takes additional steps to improve its staff sensitivity, and here's an expanded version of your text on the airline's response in the weeks following the incident, detailing the steps taken to improve sensitivity and inclusivity training while also reflecting on the broader societal impact of the woman's experience. In the weeks that followed the incident on the flight, the airline recognized that it had a significant opportunity to improve its internal culture and customer interactions. The story of the woman's experience resonated deeply within the company, prompting a series of discussions at various levels of management. It was clear that this incident was not just an isolated event, but rather a reflection of systemic issues that needed to be addressed. The management team was determined to turn this moment of injustice into a catalyst for meaningful change. To initiate this process, the airline took decisive steps to enhance its staff's sensitivity and inclusivity training. They formed a task force dedicated to reviewing existing training programs and developing new initiatives aimed at fostering a more inclusive environment for both employees and customers. The airline understood that education was key to combating implicit biases and creating a culture of respect and understanding. One of the first actions taken was the organization of a series of workshops focused on implicit bias and its impact on customer interactions. These workshops were designed to educate employees about the subtle prejudices that can influence their perceptions and behaviors, even if unintentionally. The sessions included interactive discussions, role-playing scenarios, and guest speakers who shared their personal stories about experiences with discrimination. By engaging employees in these conversations, the airline aimed to create an environment where they could reflect on their own biases and learn how to approach each customer with empathy and respect. The woman's experience was highlighted during these workshops, serving as a poignant reminder of the consequences of bias in real-life situations. Employees listened intently as they learned about the emotional toll that such experiences can have on individuals, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds. Her story became a focal point, illustrating the importance of recognizing and dismantling prejudice, no matter how subtle it may be. The airline wanted its staff to understand that their actions could significantly impact a passenger's journey, and it was their responsibility to ensure that every individual felt valued and respected. In addition to workshops, the airline launched an ongoing training program that would be mandatory for all employees, from flight attendants to corporate staff. This program emphasized the importance of inclusivity and cultural competence in every aspect of their work. Employees were encouraged to engage in self-reflection and to think critically about their interactions with customers. This initiative aimed to empower staff to take ownership of their actions and create an environment where everyone felt safe and welcome. As part of this initiative, the airline also implemented a mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with newer staff members to foster open discussions about diversity and inclusion. This approach allowed employees to learn from one another's experiences, creating a sense of community within the company. It was vital for the airline to demonstrate that it was not just addressing the issue on the surface. It was committed to building a culture of inclusivity that would endure over time. The airline's commitment to change extended beyond its internal policies. They began collaborating with organizations dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in the aviation industry. These partnerships allowed the airline to leverage external expertise, ensuring that their training and initiatives were rooted in best practices and real-world experiences. They organized community events, engaging with local organizations that supported underrepresented groups, further reinforcing their dedication to inclusivity. Within the company, the dialogue surrounding implicit bias and discrimination became a regular topic of discussion. Employees were encouraged to share their thoughts and experiences, fostering an environment where difficult conversations could occur without fear of judgment. This cultural shift was essential for breaking down the barriers that had previously existed within the organization, and it empowered employees to speak out against injustices they witnessed in their workplace. As the workshops and training sessions unfolded, there was a palpable change in the atmosphere of the airline. Employees began to approach their roles with a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that their work went beyond simply serving passengers. They were also ambassadors of the airline's values. This shift in perspective contributed to a more positive customer experience, as employees felt equipped to handle situations with greater sensitivity and awareness. The woman's story continued to circulate within the airline, and it inspired many employees to reflect on their own interactions with passengers. Several staff members reached out to her, expressing their gratitude for her courage in standing up against discrimination. They shared how her experience had prompted them to reevaluate their own biases and commit to fostering a more inclusive environment for all travelers. In the wake of these changes, the airline's management decided to implement a new policy requiring all employees to complete annual diversity and inclusion training. This commitment to ongoing education underscored the airline's dedication to maintaining a culture of respect and understanding. They recognized that change was not a one-time event, but rather an ongoing process that required continuous effort and vigilance. The positive impact of these initiatives extended beyond the airline itself. As other companies in the industry observed the changes taking place, many began to adopt similar practices in their organizations. The woman's experience became a catalyst for a broader movement within the aviation sector, inspiring discussions about the need for inclusivity and the importance of recognizing implicit biases across the industry. The airline had not only improved its internal culture, but had also set a precedent for others to follow. Throughout this journey, the woman remained engaged with the airline, participating in events and sharing her perspective on the importance of diversity and inclusion. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her experience had sparked a movement toward change. Her advocacy resonated with many, and she began to receive invitations to speak at conferences and community events, where she could share her story and inspire others to advocate for justice and equality. The airline's efforts to address the issues raised by the incident demonstrated a commitment to fostering a culture of accountability and respect. They recognized that true inclusivity required not only awareness but also action. By taking concrete steps to improve training and policies, they aimed to create an environment where all passengers felt safe and valued. As the months passed, the airline's reputation began to shift. They received positive feedback from customers who noticed the changes in staff interactions and the overall atmosphere of the airline. Many travelers appreciated the commitment to diversity and inclusion, expressing their gratitude for the efforts made to create a more welcoming environment. This shift in public perception not only benefited the airline's image, but also contributed to increased customer loyalty. The woman's story served as a powerful reminder that one individual's experience could ignite a movement for change. Her courage and resilience inspired others to speak up against discrimination, fostering a culture of accountability that extended far beyond the confines of a single flight. As the airline continued to evolve, it remained committed to learning from its past and ensuring that every passenger felt respected and valued. In the end, the incident became a turning point, not just for the airline, but for the entire aviation industry. It sparked conversations about implicit bias, customer service, and the importance of creating an inclusive environment for all travelers. The woman's experience underscored the impact of advocacy and the necessity of standing up against injustice, inspiring others to join the fight for equality and respect in all areas of life. Through her journey, the woman emerged as a leader and advocate for change, demonstrating that individual actions could resonate far beyond their immediate context. Her commitment to fostering inclusivity and understanding paved the way for a future where every passenger, regardless of their background, could expect to be treated with dignity and respect on every flight.